Hi, welcome to Cubs and Culture for April 6, 2018. This is going to be the long review of Sideways. Because I'm using this to talk about sort of classification. The movie was released in 2004. It was extremely well received. It has a 96 on Tomato Meter. It's listed as comedy, drama, and romance on Rotten Tomatoes. And then, because I'm kind of using the Golden Globes to frame this, there is this and one that's for the Oscars, which is it won Best Adapted Screenplay. For the Golden Globes, it's listed as a comedy or musical. But the thing is, if you remember, I showed you Alexander Payne's previous film about Schmidt was listed as a drama. But here's the thing: I don't think either film. They're both so similar in sort of tone and style that it's really hard for me. This is what I mean, that they sort of bounce back and forth. Sideways as a film, I think is very much a comedy, but so is about Schmidt, and I don't fully understand why they're split apart like that. I also got to point out is I'll show you the sequence in a second when I do the clips. But I'm annoyed that this film was not nominated for Best Editing at the Oscars. I might have won Best Picture if it was, given how important the editing branch is. The editing branch is actually probably the second best indicator of Oscar glory, then, opposed to the director's branch. It's very, very hard for a film to win if it's not nominated for the Eddie, which I'm pretty sure this wasn't. No, we went past it already. Okay, so Sideways, if I can talk about the movie a little bit, is the story of... well, there's several ways you can approach the story, because the meaning of the movie has several different... But let me just bring this up. Let me bring up the poster. I should buy the poster. I really like the poster. Anyway, it's the story of two college friends who are only really friends because they happen to be roommates in college. They're very different people. You have Jack, who is played by an absolutely career best performance by Thomas Hayden Church, the guy from Wings. Plays sort of a washed-up actor who's getting married. And then you have Paul Giamatti, who plays Miles, who is the main character, who is a frustrated novelist, middle school English teacher. And they're going on a week vacation up in wine country because Jack is getting married. And Miles is trying to get over a divorce, etc. And Jack is trying to have one last affair, fling, and then Miles ends up having something of a romantic relationship with this woman named Maya. Which, actual fact, I'm not going to talk too much about that because that's sort of the main through line. So the romantic comedy aspect of the movie. But the thing is, what I really like about this movie, and I guess the easiest way of approaching this is that actually the title of the movie is Sideways, and it's called that for several reasons. The most obvious of which is, of course, wine bottles are stored on their side, but of course, then the other thing is both guys in the careers, they're not really advancing in their careers. They're moving sideways. They're not moving through life in general. They're moving sideways. Their morals are not upright and standing. They're sort of morally sideways. There's sort of a sexual position implied, etc. And the thing I really like about this movie is when you first meet... People confuse empathy and sympathy a lot. So let me just quickly bring up the definitions. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. Sympathy is the feelings of pity or sorrow for someone else's misfortune. They're not the same thing. And at the beginning of the story, Jack of the two characters is the more sympathetic. Or sort of the more likable, because he's sort of a carefree guy getting married. He doesn't really do anything particularly morally questionable until about a third of the way through the film when he starts up the relationship with Stephanie, etc. And Miles is the much least. Miles kind of seems depressed for the sake of being depressed. Etc. And then Miles is also this is Paul Giamatti. Yeah, I'll bring up a picture. He seems really depressed for the sake of being depressed. And then the other thing is, because this movie is really about sort of self-deception, is Miles is way too into wine, and he's very, very pretentious. And probably the easiest way of explaining how he changes over the course of the story is he very famously, in this film, is he's going through a bunch of wine testing. He has that big freak out moment where he says he's not drinking any fucking Merlot, and then he also badmouths Cabernet Franc, but he also has a 61 Chardonnay Blanc or whatever, that big fancy bottle of wine that he drinks at the end. Well, if you don't actually know wine, you might not actually get the point. That wine is actually a blend of Merlot and Cabernet Franc, and so the whole point of him drinking it is not just him getting over his marriage, it's him not being pretentious anymore, which is why he's eating it in a crappy little restaurant or diner, and he is drinking it from a styrofoam cup. And so a lot of ways the characters switch your positions on empathy and sympathy, where Jack is the more sympathetic character at the beginning of the movie, but at the end of the movie he's a really unsympathetic character, whereas Miles is sort of a pretentious prick at the beginning of the movie. And I absolutely love this movie. I love Paul Giamatti's character. I love how he is written. I love how he's performed. But at the beginning of the movie, he comes across sort of a pretentious, full of himself prick, and at the end, he grows and changes, and he stops moving sideways. He finally moves forward in his life. And so at that sort of its deep core, this movie is a coming of age story, or a maturation story, where the main character has been stuck for the past 5 years, however long, and he finally starts moving forward again. With that being said, it's told with a lot of deep sort of humor and grace to it. So let me actually pause there and bring up the trailer so I can talk a little bit about some sort of the direction and cinematography and stuff before I show the scenes, which I think ride the line between drama and comedy really, really well. Just give me one sec. There's the button. Okay. Now, one of the reasons why I wanted to show the trailer is it sort of gives a nice impression of the color palette of the film and the cinematography. Again, this is one of those things that I don't really understand why it hasn't gotten more attention when it came out, because you're dealing with a... Okay, so this movie's a bit... One of the things I really like about this movie is because of the way in which it moves back and forth between comedy and drama, is it really comes across as sort of a complex emotion, and it's a bit like drinking. It's a little bit like getting drunk, because you have your sad moments and you have the buddy stuff, and you have some wild stuff in it, and you also have sadness and regret and everything like that. And then, of course, that works not only sort of thematically because you're dealing with a person traveling in wine country, but you're also just like Miles as a character that probably should be described as an alcoholic. And well, anyway, so the main thing I wanted to show, and especially shots like you just saw with them in the field, is I think this movie is absolutely gorgeous in its cinematography, because it has a lot of soft focus, very light color, diffused light, and very pretty film in terms of just its visual construction, in that it comes across like Italian travelogue movies of the 60s and 70s, which is, of course, the obvious points of reference. And so that is that. And the other thing I want to talk about with direction, and this comes back to the writing, is because you're ultimately dealing with morally dubious characters, even though Miles at the over the course of the story sort of grows up. They really do capture. There's enough evidence in the film where you're asked to empathize with these characters, but not necessarily sympathize. And so I really like that these characters end up, especially Miles, end up being likable, even though they're not really good people or slightly busted people. And there's a great humanity to this film, and I think that's really something that Payne is good at. Okay, now turning to the clips. The first clip, I'm including a little bit more than maybe absolutely necessary for purposes of why I'm showing this particular clip, but note that this is Miles's mother. He's just stole, I don't know, like $1,500 from her. But at the end of this clip, you'll hear her say, "Do you need some money?" And it seems like this is one of the things that I think is a really good balance thing for Payne. Okay, let me pause there for a second. Okay, for comedy here, this is just Jack getting up, but the way in which Church does this, I think is absolutely hysterical because it's just like, up and we're gone. Anyway, going back to his mother, that line about you need some money really makes it's still a shitty thing that he does, but it seems like the mother knows that he does this, so it's not like really stealing. And it's an interesting ambiguity. Anyway, so he was just told that his ex-wife got remarried and they're going to be at Jack's wedding. And this is one of the scenes where I really think it's a really interesting scene in terms of what's comedy, because it's entirely dramatic, because he's having a bit of a freak out here because he's concerned about making a scene and being a social pariah. He was just reminiscing about his ex-wife, etc. And that's all sort of dramatic and everything like that, even though he's being slightly over the top. It has been 2 years, etc., etc., etc. And then it's this particular moment where he just sort of pops out of the car, grabs a bottle, and then that moment where he just rips the cork with his mouth, and then they're running down the hill, and the scene turns very quickly from sort of this very, oh my god, psychological breakdown to this very almost slapsticky running two middle-aged men who are sort of out of shape trying to run down a steep incline, and it kind of connects to Jack getting up from out of bed. Okay, so this scene right here is sort of the first dinner date, and I'm showing you it because this is one of the things where I meant about sort of direction and editing being sort of he was not in for direct, but for editing it uses a lot of dissolves here, and this scene is profoundly interesting in terms of it's sort of like a perfect summation of the film, because what it is Miles is going to get drunk and he's going to dial his ex-wife Victoria, but it's set up as a blind double date. Maybe not blind, something the right word, but it's sort of a double date, and it starts moving backwards and forwards a little bit in time. So you hear him dialing and the ringing of the phone before he actually gets up and dials it, because it's both him. It's because he's thinking about it, and that's coming up in the second. He's going to go to the dark side, to use the phrase in the film, and he knows about it. And so he's like, it's predicting and it's foreshadowing and everything like that. But the way in which it's built, sort of visually, is very, very striking. In that, let's see when it starts. There's going to be a series of dissolves and quick cuts, where it really, okay, this is the section where it's going to start really working and visually, where I've been trying to talk about there. Like these series of dissolves, the way in which it sort of rack focuses and dissolves to the glasses, to the wines, and then to the various foods. It sort of keeps, initially this seems like sort of a having an entertaining drinking, having a good time, sort of a light frothy montage, and then because the music starts getting a little bit sadder, everything like that, and then the phone sound starts coming in, it starts being sadder and sadder and sadder as you know he's about to drunk dial. And then you also see Jack sort of grab his hand and stop him from pouring more wine, etc. So this is one of those scenes where it really isn't, drama and it isn't really comedy, and it's not that there's two elements at the same time. It's both. Where it is sort of a romantic comedy, getting to know you montage, and sort of having the light travelogue vacation aspect of the film, and sort of a celebration of wine, etc. But then it starts getting a little bit darker, and getting more. There's Jack reaching for the wine, stopping him from pouring wine, for example, and it gets really where the tone of this scene is really both at the same time, where it's a comedic scene and a dramatic scene, because again, outside the restaurant he's told don't go to the dark side, and of course he goes to the dark side, which sort of is like Jack utterly knows him and he knows this is going to happen, etc. And so there's that sort of tragic comic feel to this scene, and in a lot of ways it's sort of a summation of the entire film and to Alexander Payne's filmography. Now this scene, Miles just found out his book was getting rejected. This is another scene where it has a very similar structure to the chasing down the hill scene, where Miles just wants to get drunk here because he just got some really bad news from the rest of his some of the bad news about his novel getting rejected, sort of the final rejection, that novel's probably never getting published, etc. And this is one of those moments where the scene ends up turning dramatically and comedically, because eventually he'll get so upset here, he's going to... this is somewhat gross. Like, this is sort of a gross out gag. Like, the hill is sort of slapsticky, but this is sort of a gross out gag. He's eventually going to grab the spit bucket here and drink, not directly from it, but basically pour it on himself to drink it, which is both sort of really hysterical in a sort of gross out sort of way. Fortunately, that was grape juice for Paul Giamatti, but it's also really dramatic because this is the point where he seems like the most like an alcoholic, because he is so desperate to get drunk here. Okay, so this scene is Jack has another affair with with Cammy. He left his wallet behind. The reason why I'm showing you it is, one, I think it's the best acting scene by Thomas Hayden Church, because he's playing an actor. So Jack is acting here where he's just trying to manipulate Miles to go back and get his wallet, but it's also ever so often actual Jack realizing he's such a fucking idiot coming through every so often, but it's mostly sort of awful sitcom acting trying to manipulate Miles, and then sort of more with very slight moments of Jack actually realizing how much of a shit he is. But the other reason why I'm showing you it is I wanted to talk a little bit about moral standing here, because Jack here, this is sort of his big crisis in the film, and he never ever really gets out of this sort of bustedness of being a womanizer and being thinking of his cock, basically. And Miles realizes it, and this is one of the reasons why, because Jack is sort of stuck in this cycle, and Jack throughout this movie ends up just not moving forward in his life. He ends up moving sideways, and it's this sort of scene where Miles, seeing his friend sort of break down and try to manipulate him, even though he does go back for the wallet, where this is one of the things that really moves him to sort of mature and get out of this rut that he's been in. And this is this scene. Then with the scene connected to his Victoria being pregnant, that's why he ends up getting over being a pretentious prick and end up drinking the wine, getting over his marriage, etc., 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 and changes in this core. As far as sort of comedy is, this situation is very much a sitcom situation, because Jack was having sex with a married woman. And then his husband comes home. Well, you find out. I'm not going to show up because it's nudity, but in the next scenes, you find out that that it's sort of a game for this couple, and Jack was sort of manipulated. Okay, so this scene, I was specifically wanting to show because of the editing. This is sort of the travel montage. It actually happens in the first third of the movie, sort of the first big vacation day. And now one of the reasons why I like it is, one, it's sort of visually striking because it's a series of almost new wavy panel editing. And then also in terms of like pace, there's a lot of sort of exposition because they end up going on basically a series of wine tours here. And you totally get the sense that they spend all day touring and learning about wine and drinking and having fun. But it's only about 3-4 minutes. Those are ostriches, which is sort of a weird scene. 3 or 4 minutes. 3 or 4 minutes, maybe 2-3 minutes, but there's a lot sort of packed into here, sort of tonally. This sort of joke of them being sort of roguish characters because they're stealing wine here, etc. Sort of just the light, sort of the fun, lighthearted stuff of being in wine country, and then also. Because this movie is partially, even though the main character is an alcoholic, it ends up being a pretentious wine lover. It's still sort of a celebration of wine, and there's this montage with panel editings. This is one of the reasons why I don't understand why it was not nominated for editing. Is this is a really cool scene because it's paced well. There's a lot of information in it. It's sort of stylistically striking, etc. Okay, so this little bit here is him talking to, this is after they've gotten together. I just wanted to show this scene specifically because of this shot of the light coming through there here, and this shot with those sort of front lit. It's absolutely gorgeous, and I don't fully understand why it wasn't looked at for cinematography. So that's going to be pretty much it for Sideways. So Cubs and Culture out for April 6th. Okay, as always here on Cubs and Culture, the clips I show are from DVDs that I have bought. I am using minimal usage of it. I try to avoid showing climaxes. I try to remove sounds. I do not monetize my channel. I do this for commentary, criticism, and educational purposes. It is, I believe, I am claiming the use of this copyright under fair use. Okay, have a good day.